Good morning, everyone. I'm very excited about this. When Brand Innovators gave me this panel to moderate, I was extremely happy as I'm a huge NFL fan, and we'll learn a lot about that. But first of all, thank you to Brand Innovators and the team here. Also, shout out to the Colorado people that are watching this streaming wise. Quick introduction on me. I'm John Cobb. I'm the CEO founder of VuePlanner. And what VuePlanner is a contextual targeting and brand suitability technology platform focused on YouTube. We help brands and agencies with outcomes. You can talk to me about that at lunchtime, or we have some members of our team, Ryan Rusin, our VP from Chicago. We have Russ, our sales director in New York, and Chris with us here as well today. And as we were talking, one of the things that Sarah and I want to do is first change the subject that we're talking about. Instead of reviving legacy brands, we want to say evolving brands, because I wouldn't call the NFL kind of a reviving brand by any stretch of the imagination. And then secondarily, future-proofing your business. And so I also asked her if she wouldn't mind, and I'll let her talk here in a minute, if I could do her intro, because I think she has an amazing background. So she started originally at Mattel on the brand side with a girls portfolio, and that was in Toronto. Then she moved all the way over to London to work for Turner Broadcasting and worked on emerging markets, taking that company into Africa, the Middle East, and Pan-Euro. So that's a media background from there. Then she flew all the way back and went back to Toronto to Coca-Cola in integrated marketing. And as Raphael said, she is addicted to Diet Coke. So she's one of those 13 people, or
I am.
drinks 13 cans a week, or whatever that metric specifically was. From there, she went to Boston to be the VP of marketing for ASICS, which is another brand, obviously. Then she moved down to New York to take on VP of marketing for the New York Football Club. So if you think about that, it's an amazing career that really led her up to the NFL, which she's been at for about a year now as the VP of marketing for brand and consumer marketing. One of the things that I want to do to kick off our conversation is talk about, as business leaders and marketers, we're all designed to essentially grow our business. And realistically, when you boil it down, you kind of look at kind of existing customers and new customers. And in the case of the NFL, you'd be looking at, existing fans. So the NFL has probably done a good job, at least in my mind, doing a number of things to do that, right? So originally, I'm kind of on the older side. If you look at it, NFL was just Sundays and Monday Night Football. Now you have Sundays, you have Mondays, you have Thursdays, you have Sunday Night Football, you have a number of things. So essentially expanding to your existing customers more consumption opportunities. In addition to that, the draft, I don't know if anybody watched the draft, but it's become a main event. I think there was 300,000 people there in Kansas City. So that's become another touch point. And you can say that's for both existing fans and new fans. And then also international expansion, right? There's going to be 5 games, I think. Germany is going to be on the docket this year. So the NFL has done a lot for essentially growing the existing fan base. And so what I want to ask Sarah is, like, how are you approaching, growing the NFL into new customers, new communities, and that side? Like, what are some of the initiatives you and your teams are working from an innovations perspective?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you're the world's best hype man. So I want to take you to every meeting with me. I think, the NFL, we're very fortunate. We have 400 million fans globally, which is not something that we take lightly and not something that we're complacent about. So I think when we think about innovation from a fan development perspective, I would say we're equally as focused on the retention and really increasing that consumption with current fans for all the reasons you said: more and better football, more ways to watch, innovation in game broadcast. But obviously acquiring new fans is critical for us to future-proof our business. And so my team's job is really focused on how we build that affinity with the game, with a new generation, really keeping football at the forefront of culture. So not just about what's happening on Sundays, Mondays, and Thursdays, but everything that is surrounding the game itself. How we go about doing that has been a bit of a test and learn, I would say, over the last number of years. We're an incredibly data-driven organization. So I was nerding out a little bit over the last panel. Unlike what you would assume would be the case for sports organizations, we have a wealth of data that we base a lot of our decisions off of, but we're strategically focused on broadening our fan base through really four key fandom driving levers. The first being participation. We know that 83% of fans become fans before they're 18. And if you play the game, you're 4 times more likely to grow up to be an avid fan. So getting kids involved from as young an age as possible is critical to that acquisition strategy. The second is engaging with live games, and that doesn't just mean the stadium experience, but over the past number of years, we've made huge strides in that broadcast innovation space, whether that is co-viewing opportunities for families or what we just announced this past year with Sunday Ticket moving to YouTube, Thursday Night Football on Amazon Prime, really meeting our fan where they are and giving them more opportunities to consume. The third is our use of players and teams, because people don't fall in love with the league as much as we would love to think so. They fall in love with Jalen Hurts and Tom Brady and the Buffalo Bills and the LA Rams. And so we've been really laser focused on continuing to evolve this strategy that we call helmets off, which is really focused on humanizing our players and introducing them and who they are off the field to fans as a means to acquire. And then the fourth key pillar for us is really purpose and showcasing the purpose that underpins everything we do. The NFL does an incredible amount of community and cause work, not all that we talk about broadly. But there are opportunities for us to really lean into that throughout the course of the season through our players. And that has become a real critical lever to especially engaging that younger audience who care as much about how you walk the walk as how you talk the talk.
That's amazing for initiatives. On the younger side, on the youth side of things, one of the things that I think that I've seen is that you guys have done very well is partnerships. And so on the youth side, Nickelodeon is one of the partnerships, as you're saying, like how do you get more in-game experience or viewing experience and family-based experience. So can you talk a little bit about that partnership and kind of how that developed, or how to expand upon that?
Yeah, I'm exceptionally proud of the Nickelodeon partnership. I can't take any credit for it. It was there long before I arrived. But I really think it's sort of first in its class when you look at the sports landscape. The impetus behind that partnership was really this idea that, there have to be better ways to get kids involved in watching the game. And anyone who's a parent in here knows that keeping a kid still for 3 to 4 hours is like a pipe dream that'll never happen. So the idea of being able to have something that teaches kids the X and O's of the game, but still allows it to be fun and is in sort of their language was really the brief, I think, when the partnership started. And it has really evolved. So we have a Nickelodeon simulcast game that happens every year. Last year it was at Christmas. This year it's at Christmas as well. And it is the Nickelodeon take on the NFL. So it's explaining the X's and O's to kids with SpongeBob, and it's, Gronk dressed as an elf on a shelf, explaining ref calls. And it's just a lot of silliness, but that still enables kids to understand the game itself, and also offers parents an amazing way to watch the game with their kids that creates kind of that family bonding occasion. The partnership has expanded. So in addition to that one game, we also have a weekly highlights show called Slime Time that features Nate Burleson and an influencer named Young Dylan. And they sort of partner up every week. And similar to the purpose of the game, they also use that opportunity to educate kids on the top teams, the top players. There is, an MVP award where there's a Nickelodeon most valuable player that gets slimed every week. So it's been an amazing way to bring the game to life. Also an amazing partnership that we've been able to extend out to our 32 clubs who are incredibly involved and see this as a huge opportunity for them and a huge tool for them to be able to engage with a younger audience. So I think that's been a blueprint that's really worked well, that we have then continued to try to model out through some of our other partners, through altcasts we're doing on Amazon with groups like Dude Perfect or Spring Hill's The Shop. So I anticipate there will be more of that, given that it feels like we've sort of cracked that code, but it's been an incredible kind of cornerstone to our youth plan.
Great. Thank you for that. When you look as marketers, I think one of the things is going in with the existing customers and in growing those new customers. What I'm really seeing is obviously one of the things is that we're kind of a melting pot in the United States, and we have many communities and different groups to market to. And there's been a lot of initiatives in DEI and things along those lines. What I've seen from trends perspective is that it used to be, marketers would work like with multicultural agencies and that, and would be kind of split out. But now I'm seeing more and more of those decisions really be made at the core and just part where they may be more of the executioners, if you will, but the strategy is more involved in there as one trend. And then secondarily, you're seeing more and more diversity, I think, in the decision making and marketers in general within organizations. So knowing that, like, what is your approach to kind of communities and culture, and how are you growing that from a fan base perspective? What are some of the initiatives you have there?
I think the point around DEI not living in a silo is massive. And I think we're way past that, to be totally honest. I think if your DEI strategies aren't permeating every part of your business, from, what is happening tactically all the way up to who's around the table making the decisions, it's hard for that to be authentic. So the NFL, I feel very lucky to work at a place where sort of that is also the mentality. You mentioned there's, a great amount of diversity at the NFL, both from the league office and across all of our clubs, which I think has helped to inform a strategy and a tactical approach that is really authentic. And then I think when it comes to how we're looking at building plans for different communities, the biggest evolution for us is a couple of years ago, we had our youth plan nicely in a box here, and we had a Latino plan nicely in a box here, and LGBTQ plus plan, et cetera, et cetera. And I think we had to take a step back at some point and look at who we were talking to. So getting out of the weeds of like what the initiative was and looking at it from an audience perspective was really important, because we realized that no one in these groups identifies as one singular thing, right? Everyone has some sort of intersectional piece to who they are. And so the real unlock for us was saying, instead of having each of these marketing plans that will live in silos, let's look at them across the board, across the audience, and figure out how we build intersectionality into those plans. So across all of our communities, whether we are talking to, Latinos first and foremost, we're looking at the different nuances in that target audience. Same with youth, same with women. And that has become really critical for how we have, I guess, strategically set up how we're looking to engage those. And then secondly, we had to really get away from the thinking around activating against language. And that's probably one of my biggest pet peeves working on the Latino audience. When you say Latino, people are like, great, translate it. And you're like, no, it's like much more nuanced than that. So we're really focused, again, on how we build plans that are intersectional, but that also look to connect on culture versus just ethnicity. And that is sort of all of those universal passion points that we all connect to: music, fashion, food, that, make you engage with anything and that live around sport itself. So that's also been sort of a key strategic pillar for us in terms of how we built those plans.
So how do you take that and interweave that into like maybe creative executions or experiences for the different communities? Like, can you give us like some examples of that?
Yeah, sure. I'll take the Latino community specifically. We are in our third year now of an initiative, a season-long campaign called Por la Cultura, that kicks off at the beginning of the season, has a high point and celebrates the moment of Hispanic Heritage Month, but then continues to run throughout the course of the season in different ways. We have a brand campaign where we celebrate our Latino players, the new class and the legends who have come before us, and really tell their origin stories. And then we really focus from a cultural passion point perspective around music and fashion. So one of the things that we noticed when we were first working with our clubs on Hispanic Heritage Month activations was that clubs were like, that's great. I mean, we can't really afford musical artists to come in necessarily and perform at halftime, and we don't have the licensing rights to a lot of the reggaeton music that we would want to share. And so about 2 years ago, we developed, working with a production group called Neon 16, who are very big in the space. We developed a mixtape, a Latino mixtape that we licensed out for every single one of our 32 clubs. We created music videos around. We launched it partially at Latin Grammys Week. And in addition to that, now all of our clubs have access to the music, but also talent to perform in their stadiums in and around key celebratory moments. Separately, we have a fashion collaboration we run every single year at Super Bowl called Origins. And it really focuses on highlighting local designers within the communities where we have Super Bowl each year. And there is a Latino component to that as well, where we're really looking for those up and coming Latino designers to give them the space to be able to tell their story and bring their creations to life at scale. So there's a number of different ways through sort of those passion points on an ongoing basis that we're trying to continue to activate and really, hand over the scale of the stage we have and the spotlight we have to the community at large and kind of elevate the work that they're doing.
Great. Moving that more to kind of like a demographic look. Obviously, when you look at the female fan base, I think one of the numbers was you have 80 million female fan base. How are you guys kind of approaching that? I mean, one of the things that I found, and I watched one of the previous Brand Innovators events that you guys did at the Super Bowl this year in Scottsdale, was one of the people they had on the stage was a woman who won the national Mexican team flag football. And a huge initiative that I didn't even know about was, I think you said that there was 600,000 women playing flag football in the United States. As you can say that as a kind of a development aspect of the sport, but as a father of a 18-year-old girl, and there's always daddy's girl, right? And daddy watches football, and that if there was ways to, for me to interact from a flag football perspective, I think that would be really interesting. Can you kind of share about that initiative? Because I never heard about that before.
Yeah, I mean, we are lucky that roughly half of our fan base are women. But only a quarter of those women are avid NFL fans. And I think as we started to dig into the data a little bit, it showed us that the difference really is that from a very young age, boys have an opportunity to play that most girls don't. And that was, a really interesting, unlock for us as we started thinking about different ways to engage women. Giving women a real meaningful way to show up within our brand was really important. So, we have had our football operations team and teams across all of our clubs working on the flag space for years now. But really, there's been a ton of momentum that's picked up in probably the last 12 to 18 months around the space. We have 600,000 girls playing. There was a 40% increase last year in girls' high school flag, which I think is remarkable when you think about the impact that COVID has had on high school sports. And so it was really important for us in the last season from a marketing perspective to lean into that narrative and help elevate it. So the way that came to life for us was everything from brand campaigns to we had flag football exhibitions in every single one of our international game series. We reinvented the Pro Bowl games, if anyone watched, which was not a light lift, but had all of our players helmets off playing flag with Diana Flores, the captain of the Mexican women's national team, as the offensive coordinator for one of the teams, and then ultimately used our biggest stage with our Super Bowl spot to feature Diana, her story, and really put a stake in the ground around the movement for women and girls flag football. And I think, I feel incredibly lucky to work for a brand that is, so rooted in conviction and what this means for the future of the brand, but what this means for an entirely new generation of people to be able to see a place for themselves. That, flag football is not our bread and butter. It's not what keeps the lights on a Sunday, Monday, Thursday, but it definitely is key for us in terms of how we think about welcoming people into our brand in a much more accessible and inclusive way than we ever have before.
Yeah, and I think a side benefit is obviously sports can be the intersection of family. It also can be something that builds self-esteem. It also can be be something that builds competitiveness at all different levels. And so both from youth and a girls' perspective, I think it's important. Just a side note on that also too, I think one of the stats there was that flag football is in 100 countries and 20 million people participating, which that seems pretty amazing to me. I think, as we kind of switch, to kind of summarize some of this, what would you recommend? Obviously at the NFL, you have a lot of resources and there's marketers here of different size companies, and that as you approach it, it sounds like you've kind of really moved from a brand centric perspective to more along the lines of an audience based perspective, and then touching on all those things. So what would be some of the recommendations that you would give, or how you guys have approached that process to, once again, under the same guise of building new customers? How would you say that you are approaching that?
I think that pivot is just it, right? Is looking at things through an audience lens first before you immediately get into tactical execution. And I think really understanding who your audience is, how they currently interact with your brand, and also who they are outside of the purpose you serve to them is really important. I think it's easy for brands to get caught up and we want to go after youth and this is amazing. We have this great new product and we'll push it at them and hope that they like it. And we'll throw an influencer that they like against it and call it a day. I think, we're not giving audiences enough credit and consumers enough credit. They're complex and they're nuanced, and the way they engage with all of our brands, is very different. And so making sure that you understand the audience first and are kind of building a marketing approach from there, I think has been what has been really, really critical for us in terms of expanding our fan base.
Great. So with that, I'm looking at the time here, and I was told we can go a little bit past, but obviously we covered a lot of different topics across the board, building a new customer and fan base. So I'd like to open it up to anybody that has questions, and I'm going to slow it down so that the mic gets to you guys, because everybody can hear the questions. But we're so fortunate to have Sarah here, who has, as I said in kind of the intro there, a huge background in many different places. So don't just ask about the NFL. If there's other things that she's done that you'd like to learn about, you can go ahead and do.
Sarah, great 4 pillars. There were probably 2 things that I didn't hear that I was expecting in your strategy, which is fantasy and online gambling. How have those 2 kind of executional elements influenced what you've learned about your audience and how to engage with them?
Great question. I think fantasy and online gambling for us really fit into that first sort of pillar, right? Deepening consumption. Once you're in, how do you get even more involved and bought in? But fantasy is really interesting because I think, I'll use my own personal experience. I was not as avid of a football fan as I am now. And my first introduction into really loving football was through fantasy, and through kind of first starting with the players I loved and the teams I kind of knew about, and using fantasy as that connection that drew me in to watch every Sunday. So I think that there's something that is also really interesting about how that specific product allows us to both acquire and deepen consumption. And the sports betting piece of things obviously is, a monster in its own right, but has absolutely helped in terms of deepening that consumption and taking someone who used to be a casual fan and converting them into an avid fan, as they literally have skin in the game every single time that they tune into a game.
Yeah, and I would say on the fantasy side, that seems to be, partners that are really kind of doing a lot in the fantasy sports side, whether it's ESPN or the different kind of fantasy sides of things. So there was another question I saw in the back there. Somebody still have a question, or they changed their mind? Okay. Any other questions for Sarah and the 4 pillars, or any other things that you guys are thinking about that maybe challenges you have in your business that you'd like to get her perspective on?
So you've had some experiences across multiple sports leagues and ASICs and those types of things. I guess as you look at the different sports leagues, what are things that at the NFL you try to emulate from, whether it's the NBA or soccer or other sports leagues as you embark on the next chapter?
That's a great question. It's funny, and this is not a cop-out answer when I say this. We're obviously always looking across the table to see what other leagues are doing, but I don't think that there are specific things that we've really looked at to kind of jump on and copy or make our own, to be totally honest. I'm not just pumping the NFL's tires when I say that. I think in many ways we do tend to be leaders in innovation, whether that is, moving key moments of our week and broadcast over to streaming platforms, or the altcast strategy that we've employed, giving, people a different way to watch simultaneously. I think a lot of that has really started at the NFL. I do think that there are key initiatives or values that we hold hands across leagues on, whether that's player health and safety or, some of our cause work and how we're showing up through our 32 clubs. The NBA does an amazing job at that. There are amazing clubs within the English Premier League that also do a great job at that. But I think, we feel very fortunate that we have the ability to be able to innovate and create a lot of that ourselves.
Great question. I know everyone has another question. We'll go one more question. I know you guys want to get to lunch in that, but if you have a question or you're thinking about a question and you're not a question asking person, this is a great time to ask a question. So I'll give another 30 seconds for that. So if anybody has a question, go ahead right there. This will be our last question.
I feel privileged to be the last question.
Okay.
I'm just going to take us back about 4 or 5 years where we started seeing or continued to see at that time a lot of negative stuff coming out of the players and the leagues. We don't see a lot of that today. And it's interesting, at least I don't, given how much more news is available and how many more channels. What do you attribute that to?
I mean, again, I can't take any credit for this, but I think, the last couple of years have been tough generally, right? Outside of sport. And I think in the same way that all brands have had to learn to kind of reach out to their consumers and listen to what their consumers really want and, how they want to be spoken to. I think the same goes within the sports space and to our players. There has been a lot of work that's happened at the NFL side to work really closely with our players from the marketing perspective. The entire way we work with players has evolved since our CMO, Tim Ellis, came on board with this idea of helmets off and really creating one-to-one relationships with our players and understanding who they are and what they're passionate about. And I think a lot of our cause work, whether that it has been our lean into social justice in a much bigger way, or what we do around identifying cancer, or what we're doing, with spotlighting different causes that players feel really strongly about through My Cause, My Cleats. I think there's been a real concerted effort to put the players first also in terms of how we connect with them from a marketing perspective. So, I think that that's partially part of it. And I think every brand and every league has kind of just learned from the last couple of years in terms of, how important that open line of communication is. We're not without our challenges and we're not without things that we get wrong, but I think we're much more aware of our blind spots than we maybe have been in the past.
Great. Well, it's been my honor. And as I said earlier, I was extremely excited to be able to moderate this. And I want to give a huge round of applause because I think Sarah did an amazing job. Thank you so much.